Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. My name is Sebastian Moore.
And I'm Hilary.salt.
And today we're doing a slightly different thing. So we're actually going to do an interview with the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston.
Great to be here, guys.
Welcome.
So we thought this is a perfect opportunity to speak to you because you're here in Manchester in the office.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's lovely to be here. I mean, honestly, it's fantastic. We had this small place in Glasgow for years, and it wasn't really a place we could really come together and chat and organise things properly. So this new HQ here is going to be a game changer. So it's wonderful. And it was good. But what people don't know is we were here yesterday and had a full day. And
Yeah.
I think I'm not against people doing hybrid working. Some people it works out for, but I think people need to be together. I really do. I think you get more done. You can sort of achieve more if you're in the same room. So yeah, it's good. I'm very excited about it. Good.
Great.
Okay, let's get into it. So
Yeah.
the latest news then is that Keir Starmer's been visiting Mr. Trump in Washington.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you see any of these videos of the two of them?
Well, I was at a gig last night during much of this happening in our time. But when I got home, I did have a look, and it was quite cringy actually.
It was a bit
really quite
embarrassing.
cringy. You've got the Prime Minister, and he gets a little letter out and say, "Oh, the King's written to you," and it's like, and people characterise it by a sort of, we're a sort of province of this big empire, and he's gone to suck up to the emperor and as a provincial sort of district commissioner or whatever, and it does have that. I mean, that's how it felt to me. I mean, I suppose from the British government's point of view, he's got to try and get it right. He's got to try and win Trump over. And flattery, everyone says flattery is important, but it was a bit of a circus. But behind that, actually, there are two or three very, very important things for us as a country. Future trade policy, possible future trade deal with the United States, which people have talked about, and also the Chagos thing hanging over the thing, because of course the Labour Party rushed into this, giving away the Chagos Islands at high cost to Mauritius when Biden was in, and then Trump comes in, and a lot of us thought, well, what's Trump going to say about this? Because they've got an American base there, Diego Garcia. So there's all of these important things happening, and as I say, I don't want to be too hard on Starmer. He's trying to do his job, but it was cringy. I mean, there's no
It's
doubt.
weird, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people would think that Keir Starmer was very anti-Trump, and it seems like this Labour government are doing everything they can to sort of show that they're quite friendly with the Trump administration. And it almost feels like he's going overboard. Like it feels to me like the kid that gets bullied in the playground and starts to sort of be nice to the bully. Like, well, here's a letter for you from the king. It felt very weird to me. But anyway, let's talk about Chagos Islands, because you mentioned it. People were expecting Trump to be against the deal, and it seems like from the reports that he's happy to go along with it. Does that surprise you?
Well, I just don't think we can know. I mean, so what people are saying is that there must be some other deal, because it's very transactional with Trump, theoretically. He's not so fussed. It's like, what's in it for us? What do I get? How can I crack a good deal for my country? And that's fine. I mean, but it's puzzling, because you have to review what's happened, right? So Treaty of Paris, we had this jurisdiction over these islands since 1811. So you have over 200 years of unbroken sovereignty over it. No one else has them. We have control of them. And then Mauritius gains independence in 1968. There's no talk of this being part of it. It's never been part of Mauritius. And Mauritius, after all, is 1,400 miles away to the south. So it's not an integral part. And then suddenly agitation starts and eventually builds. And then the legal agitation that we want these islands, and it's illegitimate somehow for Britain to have them, ends up at the ICJ in International Court of Justice putting out a ruling which wasn't binding in 2019. And then what worries me is that you've got a lot of post-colonialists, a lot of anti-colonialists in the government, people like Starmer himself, people like the Foreign Secretary, who's clearly... A lot of these people would look at Chagos and say, we shouldn't have ever had these things. So they're very keen to get... So how can they defend it as a British territory if they themselves don't really believe we should have it? So what worries me, Seb, is that I don't think they're on our side for a start. I think that we've got sort of the wrong government. I don't think the Tories were much better. They started talking about it. But the long and the short of it is sort of liberal legalism. It's sort of a legal activism in the international stage to try to get these things. You know, the comical thing is that the judges, if you look at the actual judges that were on this this panel that decided it, made the judgment. You have a Chinese judge who failed to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Failed to. So it's fine. So sovereignty in Ukraine didn't matter, but somehow I think you've got some of these things. You've got to work out what's happening and work out who your friend is, who your enemy is, and just say no. You know, and that's what I would have done. And I don't think you can have the deal looks absolutely catastrophically terrible, because you're giving away billions of pounds which you don't have and which we're borrowing to produce. To give away something, to pay to give away something you already have. So it's totally nonsensical. And I don't know, frankly, you can't know what Trump is doing on this.
Just to introduce another player into this discussion, the kind of conspiracy theorists are suggesting that this is really something to do with Britain trying to build its relationships with China. Is there anything in that?
Well, it could be, but it's an insane proposition.
Yeah.
I mean, the base itself, by the way, if you speak to security experts, the base itself in Diego Garcia, which is a joint UK-US base, it makes no sense unless you also control the entire maritime jurisdiction around it. So there's no good having the base and not having control over the waters that surround it. So if you give the waters that surround it to a China-aligned state, the base probably isn't very much use to you in the end. So it just makes no sense at all to me. I think it's ludicrous. I spoke against it at the Durham Union had a debate about Labour's record, and I spoke quite passionately against it. To me, it just, unless I'm missing something, it makes no sense at all to give it away. It really is crazy, and a lot of people wanted Trump to sort of to police Starmer on this, which would have been humiliating for Britain anyway, and say, get lost, we're not doing this. I don't know, but who knows what's going to happen. With Trump, it could be embroiled in all sorts of things. It could be embroiled in his relationship with China even. It could be embroiled in a trade deal thing. Who knows? I don't know. Well,
anybody wanting America to play the global policeman is probably not realising that the world is changing, right? America is showing signs that it's not going to do that role anymore. And this sort of links to tariffs and the way that we have to, in the UK, recognise that what Trump and Vance are doing in America, we have to sort of catch up to that. I know you've said that we're sort of behind the curve on tariffs.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that a bit?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So to speed things up, I'll be very crude. So what's happened in Britain is that the neoliberal ideology, the New Right, the Washington Consensus, the Chicago School, all of this liberal economics has washed over politics completely for 40 years. And what's happened is it's delegitimized anything that's outside that. So it's even caused the collapse in any, I would say, left economic thinking in the Labour Party. It's gone, it's shredded. Blair shredded that. And it's also changed. They've been very successful in controlling what people think and what people say about all this stuff. Because remember in the Brexit debate, it was all about, we won't get a trade deal, or we won't get this deal, and it's assumed that you want a trade deal, for instance, with the United States. And that's if you don't get a trade deal, if you don't have massively unrestricted free imports and high flows of trade, then there's something wrong. And I'm just saying that the Americans actually domestically have had their own debate about what happened to Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, and Philly, industrially, and Detroit. What's happened to their own domestic industries? You've had the China shock. A lot of the manufacturing been shipped off to the Southeast Asia, in particular China. And American workers and American towns and cities have paid the price. So there's a lot in this. Now, I'm just saying that in Britain, we are about 10 or 15 years behind what's happening in the States in terms of, is this right? Is this really been in our interests? Is this free trade, purism, has deindustrialization worse than that? What should we do about it? So you have figures like Lighthizer, who's a main Trump advisor, right, very, very close to him. He's a massive free trade skeptic. You have people like Fletcher, and also economists like Danny Roderick over there at the American universities who are arguing the case for some sensible protectionism and some industrial policy. So they are ahead of us, and sadly, actually, in this country, it's this party And one or two academics and some trade unionists make the case, and no one else makes the case. But what I'm arguing is that it's an intellectually legitimate case, and unless you think it's just economics and it's not political economy, it's a massively politically salient case to make. Why should we accept, for instance, why should we accept unfair trade? Why should workers in Sheffield have to compete with slave labour? Do you think that's right? Morally or economically, do you think it's right? I don't.
Are you the only politician in the UK talking about these things?
Pretty much the only politician, yeah. Yeah, I think so. No, I think, to be fair, Miriam Cates talks about it, Nick Timothy talks about it, Maurice Glassman talks about it. But we are the only political party that has policies on it. And I slightly despair of the political class in the UK because, and I joke, I pull people's legs. I say I don't really understand fully Starmer's policy on trade. I don't understand Reform UK's policy on trade. Probably they don't have a policy. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Are they free traders? Are they protectionists? What? And they are deciding. And this is why I think, honestly, the whole debate in the UK is about 10 or 15 years behind. The reason that Trump and Vance are prepared to put tariffs on to protect their industries is because they've had 15 years of debate about it, and the debate has been legitimate. And we're just starting, and I'm worried about that because we need to get on with it.
So the BBC headline this morning, I think, was along the lines of a UK-US tariff-free deal is imminent.
Yes.
Is that bad news then?
It could be very bad news, yeah. It could be, I'm in favour of anything that's in this country's interest politically and economically. And let's just backtrack before I answer that question. So one of the things that needs to be knocked down is the idea that free trade for all countries 100% at all times is good. No, it isn't. Historically, that's total nonsense. The US built its industries up behind a tariff wall. Post-war, South Korea did. So it could be very beneficial for a country to have some tariffs and trade protection in certain circumstances. But again, the standard of debate now, the BBC assumes that, we're desperate for a deal. Please, Trump, give us a free trade deal. Well, imagine you got rid of all tariffs. There'd be no agriculture here. There would be no, the cost base of American agriculture is so much lower than the UK. The farms are much bigger. They're more mechanised and efficient. So you won't have that. So in some of these things, you have to say, well, do you want any farming here or not? We only supply about 60% of our calories now domestically, which is strategically quite dangerous. So for lots, it's yet another thing. I wouldn't doubt that ultra free trade prioritizes cheapness.
Yeah.
You will get cheaper goods, but what we've done over the last 20, 30 years is we've prioritized cheapness, price over security. So is it secure to have no steel production? Is it secure to have no food production or less food production than you need? There are some strategic areas that you should say, no, there's a line here, actually. We're going to, and we ought to have learnt in the pandemic there were certain things that we should just keep safe here. So there's a lot in that. So to get back to the question, I wouldn't jump into an FTA with the United States. I think if you get on the ONS website and you look at I've spent a bit of time on this, and you look at the exports and imports and the bilateral trade deficits or surpluses, we have quite a big trade surplus with the United States now. And I think what would be at risk if you got rid of all trade friction, is that surplus, we get, when all's said and done, when all the trading's happened each year, we come out on top. It's very important because we've got a deficit with so many countries, and we've got a massive deficit with the EU. And it would terrify me to interrupt that. I don't doubt you'd probably have more flow, but a key thing to understand in trade economics is flow against stock. So you might have more flowing between us, but it's a bit like turnover and leftover in companies. how much have you made at the end? At the end of the year, have you made money or have you lost it? And if you have very big trade deficits with particular partners, you will just accumulate debt. You literally have to pay that on the capital account, not the current account. You pay it at the end of the year by selling something or by issuing debt. So it's potentially interesting. But I'm sceptical for those reasons. And also I'm sceptical because I don't believe, and actually it's true, and I wish it weren't the case, the trade expertise does not really exist in the British government at the time. At this moment in time, as something we found out after Brexit, there was very little. There were no trade negotiators. You know why? Because we'd given away the competence to someone else for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do it. So I'd be worried about the negotiation itself being one-sided, to be honest. So I would, if I were Prime Minister, I would say, we'll think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of the fact that a lot of people will be listening to this thinking, what's he talking about? Trade deficits, services, a lot of this stuff will go over people's heads, including mine. I want to know, because when people hear from the outside, especially people that are not so politically active, they will hear you talking about things that Trump and Vance are doing that you think are good. And they'll think, oh, okay, that's bad then, because I don't like Trump and I don't like Vance, right? And everything becomes this binary that we've talked about a lot.
We have.
I think from what you're saying, you're not against trade, right?
No.
You still want trade.
You need trade.
You just need some limits on certain things, right?
Yeah, I think this is why it's important to have some thought and theory behind it. The idea, there are benefits to trade. There are gains to trade internationally. This goes all the way back historically. To give the standard academic examples, it's if you like marmalade, or you like oranges, you might want to trade them. We could produce oranges here, but it would cost you more. The input cost for the glass houses to produce it and the energy to produce oranges here would be higher than in southern Spain. So they've got an absolute advantage and a comparative advantage in oranges. So we ship the oranges in, and we maybe sell them wool or mutton or something else. Something else that we have an advantage in. So I would never doubt. I'm not a sort of protectionist blockhead. I think it's a stupidity to think, we just put the tariffs up and pretend we can be an autarky.
I was going to say, there's a word for that, isn't there? And you've come out with it. I was going to say, what is that word?
Yeah, an autarky is a country where, imagine, I suppose North Korea is an autarky, or something that's completely blocked off from the world. But you have to produce, you have to be self-sufficient in everything.
I knew you'd like that. You like new words, don't you?
An autarky, and then it's a verb as well, autarkic. So, and actually Kevin Hickson, who is my long time intellectual collaborator at Liverpool University and the author of the book on Peter Shaw that was overdue, he sometimes pulls my leg and says, that he said, William, you want to run a Bennite siege economy? No, I don't actually. I want you to look at industry and ask yourself whether some of the trade, in particular in aggregate, is a good idea. But on the deficits and things, it is important because it's actually quite easy to understand. Basically, you import, you export. If you've exported more than you've imported on the current account that year, you're in surplus. And you in inverted commas, if you're a company, you've made money, you've banked it. And if you're importing vastly more than you're exporting, you're in trade deficit. Now people ask, how can you do that? Well, you can do it by selling something and buying current oranges today. By selling your house, you could buy a lot of oranges, but you sold your house and you're worse off. That's the basic idea, and it tots up. And I love there's a mathematical identity to trade, which I really like because I'm a simple person. And you literally when if you've got a massive deficit on the current account, you've bought more than you've sold. There has to be an opposite equivalent on the capital account. In other words, you have to have raised the money somewhere, and there has to be some account for how you've paid for it. And you're getting poorer. What I'm arguing is that you run these trade deficits for 30 years, you get poorer, and free trade maniacs, stroke purists, don't think that matters, and I think it really does. On the maths, it does.
A lot of this is in the end of indifference, isn't
it? Is,
It's probably worth people having a read of that if you're not quite following.
Yeah, or some of the pieces I've written about trade. I've written on it. I've written 6 or 7 articles about it.
And the video you did on the end of indifference.
Yeah, that's it.
Is a bit. It's more of an entry level access to that paper. So watch the video, and then if you enjoy that, read the paper.
But I don't. The trouble is the terms. The terms, you have to have terms for stuff. But I think fundamentally it is quite easy to understand, and most people can get it quite straightforward. And if it's that difficult, no one could understand it, right?
Before we started, William, you said you could talk about tariffs for an hour, and I said, we'll have to stop you.
No, okay, sorry. Yeah.
So I think we are going to have to stop you and move on.
I think we need to do another interview one day where we just do tariffs.
Yeah.
Just
for
do
the whole
trade.
day.
Just do international trade.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the Cunliffe review, because I know this is something you wanted to talk about, and probably something that people aren't aware of. So this was a review that's been commissioned by the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, looking into the water industry.
Yeah, so the water industry is very interesting because, again, it gets back to a base theory. It's water natural monopoly. You can't have competition in a water industry because you've got pipes and reservoirs and infrastructure, and you can't suddenly say, well, I'll provide a pipe. You just can't. I mean, it's a natural monopoly. Most sensible countries, the state looks after the water supply, and in parts of this country, that's still the case. So in Scotland, as I say, if I'm up in Orkney, I'll turn on the taps and it's Scottish Water effectively providing it. But the Thatcher Revolution happened. They thought they could flog off all the family silver and flog everything else, and the private sector can do it. So you end up with little water companies, which again, their own little monopolies, because Thames Water is a monopoly, but it's a private sector one. So what happened is the state said, well, we'll get more investment in, and because the state hadn't built enough reservoirs and hadn't upgraded things. Private sector will do it. And what's happened? What's happened 35 years later is you get Thames Water laden with debt. It's got 18 billion quid's worth of debt. Banks like Macquarie and some French and Japanese banks just used it as a debt mule. Some of the tranches of
Just used it as a
debt mule.
Okay.
Debt mule, yeah.
Okay.
Using it as a beast of burden, really, yeah, and charging very, very high rates of interest on it. And always remember, so many arguments against this crazy system of privatised water, but, the gilt rate, the bond rate is cheaper. It would have been cheaper to raise the money. If you were going to build a reservoir and improve the network infrastructure, you can just, on the maths, it's just cheaper for the state to do that. So anyway, we end up with this badly regulated, Ofwat regulate these companies. There's a merry-go-round between Ofwat and Thames Water and United Utilities staff. So they're all regulating themselves. We haven't built a reservoir in 25 years. And we've accumulated this massive debt. So Thames Water is on the verge of insolvency, really. It was another $3 billion bailout recently. Yeah. And I think the whole thing is a massive mistake and a massive tragedy. And I'm frustrated because, we have a Labour government which is meant to be pro-sense on some of these things. And of course, as I said before, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They're just Thatcherites, really. And they have a review, not on what we should do about this, not having, for instance, a new bond which we could offer the public, a water bond to bring these things back into, or just let Thames Water go bust and buy it for £1, and then sorry investors, you shouldn't have done this. But none of that is on the you can't. They're not even thinking about the possibility of bringing the water industry back into public ownership. That's off the agenda. What they want this Cunliffe chap to be, who's an ex-banker, I think, is to work out how to make the regulatory system and the investment system less worse than it is now. And he's bright, I'm sure he could, but it's no solution. It's not very democratic, because if you look at the public's view on this, most people agree, as in most things with the SDP, it should be in public ownership.
So I'm really interested to know why Labour wouldn't do this, particularly because, us as a party, obviously pro public ownership of utilities, it would be easy for them to come out and say, yeah, we're going to do this, because it is politically popular. So
yes.
Why don't they do it?
It's sort of capture. I think this is a much bigger subject about what's happened to left-wing economics, how it's collapsed. There are lots of books about it. Academics have written about it, and it's puzzling. But you'd think that the Labour Party would be a vehicle for this stuff. What irritates me about people like Starmer is that he got elected as Labour leader on a pledge of doing this, and then he gets closer to the top of the greasy pole, and of course we're not going to do that now. So anything sensible or long term is put off, and like human beings do conspire, right? They do, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But I think a lot of very big money is behind the banking arrangements and the finance arrangements and the city in these entities, not just Thames Water, the other public utilities and the ones that are quoted and the rest of it. And I think it's too easy for those big money interests to buy politics off. That's what's happened. I think that happens. a lot of people who want change, real change in this, and to reassert. It's the same with house building and the same with railways to some extent, but other things don't realise how many opponents we would have on the other side trying to stop you doing this, and basically hover around SW1, influencing people, and stop any serious, big, fundamental change. Actually, it's sad, but yeah, I would say the Labour Party's captured on this stuff. It's very depressing.
There must still be a big slice of people in the Labour Party who still believe in all that, the old Clause 4 stuff, and actually would support nationalisation. So why is there why are we not hearing from those people?
Yeah, I think probably among the membership there probably would be, certainly in the McDonnell and Corbyn's days. I didn't have much time for Corbyn on his international views and some of his other views, but I think some of the economics was quite sound that McDonnell was talking about, and did have widespread support. But if the PLP if the parliamentary Labour Party is anything like our new MP in Hexham, for instance, then I don't hold much hope. I mean, I did 6 hustings in Hexham, and I outflanked him on the left on economics every single time. He had no commitment to any of these things, and his route into politics was typical Oxford, trade organisations, SPADs, and advisories, and then he wants to get on. So he's not going to say, I think this is wrong. So I don't know. To be honest, Hilary, I don't know how many people in the PLP think like we do. I'm sure some do, but it's depressing that when you get close to the top, you're going to do the neoliberal economics, which has failed.
Yeah,
and it really has failed. We haven't done anything. I mean, it's quite easy to argue intellectually with our opponents, because I always say, and we should all use this. Do you think it's working now? Right? You want to change? Do you think it's working now?
Yeah, we used it on the doorstep, didn't we? Quite often.
So I have a question for you, Hilary. So I'll be interviewer for 2 minutes. So I puzzle on the maths. Thames Water has obviously, when it was privatised in 2019. Sorry, in 1989. When it was privatised, it would have had fewer households, but it's got about 10 million customers. It's got about 10 or 11 million customers, and it's now got a debt pile of 18 billion. And it's accumulated that debt pile over those years, a third of a century.
Yeah.
And the thing that I find exasperating is, instinctively I know, but you'd be able to tell me, how much more each household would have had to have paid in a monthly bill to avoid a massive debt pile like that. And it wouldn't have been that much. You start getting it wrong over that much. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, well, I would say the debts come from 2 places. Partly the debts come from actual investment in infrastructure. Yeah. Which presumably, we would have wanted them to do that anyway. Yeah. So I kind of think that that's a legitimate part of the bill. But part of it is, I would say, from kind of financial reconstruction of the business. So it's a bit like, I was going to say over there, but people watching us can't see over there. But over there is Old Trafford football ground. Yeah,
perhaps we should show them at the end.
Yeah, we could swing the camera around. Yeah, and you'd be aware that what happened there was that it was taken over by the Glazers, who bought the business with their own money. And then they effectively issued debt from the business that they owned to pay themselves back,
draining it,
the money that they had used to buy it.
Yeah.
And that's effectively what's happened with Thames Water. So it's been bought by an infrastructure business that uses probably our pension fund money as well as everything else to buy the business, and then it puts the debt into the business to repay that amount. And generally, with these businesses, these venture capital businesses, they're looking to make a lot of money, make the business more profitable, and then get out and then sell it again. And obviously they keep the money when they sell it again. So a big chunk of that debt within the business will be from that financial reconstruction, which nobody's benefited from it. Nobody, the people who are the customers of the water company are not benefiting at all from that. So I couldn't give you a number.
No, but
You're
you get
asking
my
me for a
point.
number. I
You
don't
get
know
my
the
point,
number, but certainly there will be a big chunk of their bills that is
Yeah.
due to financial reconstruction.
Yeah, and the simple person in me would always say, look, it's very simple. You have a regional water company or a national water company. You charge the ratepayers the quantity that is needed to provide the infrastructure broadly over the years. You know?
Yeah.
And if you do it gently, you don't need to accumulate something like this. It's just. I think it reeks of short termism. I think it's financial. I think they have used it as a mule. They've drained it, and a lot of banks and a lot of other people have passed it around. They've also played pass the parcel with it as an entity anyway, which is ridiculous.
I love the idea of a water bond. So people might be aware that we still have the 3% war loan that was issued to finance the
First War.
First World War. Yeah. I could the 3% water bond 2025. I like that idea.
I mean, Michael Taylor, who advises us on economics a lot, is very keen on this, and he's a brilliant expert on bond market. I mean, the idea partly was to put a name on it because it's quite.
People buy it.
It's quite
People
sentimental, yes, because they want to do it, but also to give British investors a slight advantage, maybe a better coupon, to invest it as an incentive, because you want the savings rate to go up, because savings equals investments and equals wealth in the end. So, But anyway, it's a mess. As I say, I'm just disappointed that it's a bit of BS, isn't it, to pretend that they can. The government saying it's a mess, so let's have a little review, but don't think anything serious. Don't look at anything fundamental. Just tinker with it. Come on.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
So every time that we meet up, I'm always keen to ask you about the early days of when you got involved with the SDP, and I'm not talking about 40 years ago.
You're not talking about 81, 82,
right? No. But when you got involved again. Yeah. So you came back to the party in 2018?
2016, yeah.
2016.
It was by accident. I mean, I was, like a lot of people, I'd been in the SDP in the 80s and I'd been in the Tory party. A little bit uncomfortable that was for 4 years, and in the end, that was as much as I could do. But
why was it uncomfortable?
So I wasn't really comfortable being in the party, really. And it was strange. I was recruited by a guy who I shared an office with, a nice guy. He's a member of the SDP now, but he was mayor of Hexham, working class, social worker, not the typical Tory. And we chatted, and he said, "No, you should join." And there was, it was just when, Blair, New Labour was at its peak, really. He said you should join. I said, "Well, okay, I'll join." And I was a mate, really, And then I was offered a council seat. They didn't think I could win, but I won it. And then I was a parliamentary candidate as well. But I said to them, I remember in the selection meeting with the council seat, I said, I was in the SDP, I'm really a social democrat. And all this room of quite nice Tories, that's fine. They weren't bothered. I mean, it was quite unpolitical in that sense at that level. But
you stood on a manifesto. Did you agree with the manifesto, like in 2001?
By then, I did on the key thing, which is keep the pound. Yeah, I did, because I became a very strong Eurosceptic after reading Peter Shaw's book, Separate Ways. Because I don't think you can practice social democracy and be in that. It stops you doing it. So I was passionately against EU membership. And actually, in those days, there is a survey. You could dig it out if you really try. You could, maybe some people watching this could try. There was a survey done of all Conservative candidates in 2001, asking you two questions. Would you leave the EU? Would you repeal the Single European Act or whatever? And I said yes. And I was one of 6 Tory candidates in the whole country to say that. And I remember at the time, like people like Douglas Carswell I wanted, because in the North East, I wanted a North East seat, and I went for Blair's seat, and I got on the shortlist, and Douglas wowed the room better than I did. So he got it. And so I stood in North West Durham in the end, but he got to know him quite well. And he was a Eurosceptic, a Tory Eurosceptic at the time. And I said, yeah, just leave. He said, no, we can sort of moderate. No, at that time he was sort of moderated and sort of, no. I said, no, you can't be in this. You've just got to leave. If you want to be a nation state, you have to leave. But yeah, so anyway, so that was a quick 4 years. And I felt a bit bad when I left them, because in the council I was quite senior by that time, and I made friends, but it just didn't feel right. And I always say to the kids, broad thing in life, if it's working and you're happy, continue, and if it isn't, change it. That's it. It's basics. so I wasn't involved though. We were raising a family. I had a lot to do in business and work. But I went to see David Owen speak before the Brexit vote, and I'm a massive Owen fan. I like Peter Shaw. Peter Shaw just pips him overall, but I'm a massive Owen fan.
If anybody's got their SDP bingo card,
Yeah,
they're going to be calling house very soon.
yeah, they will. But anyway, so I'm an Owenite all the way back. Jenkins was a Liberal, no, we're Social Democrats. So he was speaking in Hexham, well before the Brexit vote. He put a little book out on the new Europe and so on. And David always thinks about these things very carefully, very serious, and published on it. And I listened to the speech in Hexham, and it was great. And of course, because of his experience as Foreign Secretary, he can always say, as Andre Gromyko said, all this sort of thing. And I just chatted to him afterwards, and he signed the little book. And I said, I was in the SDP in the 80s, and I said it's the only party I loved, and it meant a lot to us. And David said, "Oh, still going. My wife's a member,
Wow.
And I thought, really? And no one knew, It's like it was so small. And I walk in Portugal usually for a few days on my own. I sometimes go with other people every year. And a few days later, I was walking on a beach in the Anteja on my own. I thought I'll just go back and join, see what happens. And this has happened, And
what I want to know initially, what did happen when you join a party that is in the wilderness?
Yeah,
almost
50
dead.
members. Yeah, almost. Yeah. So when I joined, just innocently joined, and there was small headquarters in Glasgow and a small committee of 3 people running it theoretically, and a quite an elderly leader. And I think I was probably Googleable enough for them to say, come up and have a chat. So I did, and I said, I don't want to get involved in active politics again. I've sort of done that a few times, and quite happy just to be a member, thanks, and all this of it. And then I got involved, and then we started campaigning with Wayne. I went to the Birmingham conference in 2017. There's about 20 people there.
This is Wayne Dixon.
Wayne Dixon, yeah.
Yes.
Wayne, so Wayne was there. I met Wayne, and then I went, visited him in Middleton again before I was leader, just to see if we could give it a boost and see, because he wanted to win the seat.
So Wayne Dixon is our councillor in
Leeds.
Leeds.
Yeah.
One of 3.
Who's been on the podcast, of course.
Yeah, one of 3. And then something happened quite abrupt, which was the elder leader Peter Johnson resigned quite abruptly in, I think, either at the end of 2017 or the very first month of 18. And the chair, Sarah Devaney, was very persuasive, very, very brilliant chair, said, okay, Will, can you step up and be interim? And if you don't, that's probably it for the party, because it only had about 50 members, and it would have gone eventually if nothing had happened.
That's a bit of a guilt trip, isn't it?
Good chairs. People are quite persuasive, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the deal was, I said, look, I'll think about it. And I really, to be honest with you, people might be surprised to hear a politician say this. I'm not doing this. It is an interesting job, and I love it. It's a privilege leading the SDP. But I'm not doing it because I wanted to do it in a sense. Genuinely, I didn't really want to. I think the public needs this party, and if we don't provide it, no one else will. So it's one of those situations. But yeah, in 2018, it was, well, I'm not really sure you really know what you're about. In the nicest possible way, I told the committee that. I said, you know what social democracy is, do you? Because you're talking about direct democracy, and some of them were quite libertarian. I'm not libertarian, really. And I said, well, you want to find out what it's about. And I asked them, if you rewrote the Limehouse Declaration, this happened in a meeting in Glasgow. I said, what would it look like if you did it? I said, I don't know, really. Well, so let's do it. I said the deal was I would do it, put the foundation in, and it took about 6 months to do. Some Labour Party people helped us. Some, I think one Tory did. Journalists, thinkers did. Anyone that I thought could help us to get this foundation sorted. So we printed it, published it, and that was, as an interim leader, I thought that was my sort of job done and see where it goes. And then I was at a friend's house in Norfolk, and I got a call from Sarah, and she said, Patrick of Flynn's joined. I thought, oh.
And he was an MEP at the time.
MEP, yeah. And a major figure on the Brexit debate, and a wonderful guy, and one of the nicest people you could meet in politics also, just by the way. And I thought, okay, that's a game changer for me, because then suddenly we got 600 new members from that. And also at the time, think about it, right? This tiny little party that might have been put out of ELCOM registration could easily have happened.
ELCOM being the Electoral Commission.
Yeah, the Electoral Commission. Yeah, we could have just struck us off, and that was it. After 37 years, and suddenly we had an MEP in the European Parliament, and the great thing was the Lib Dems only had one, and the SDP had one, so that was great fun. And then it was there's lots of metaphors you can use, but it was like a roundabout that was getting faster or whatever, and then Rod joined, and you got another 1,000 members from that, and so Rod Little, yeah. So you just got to. That was what happened, basically. That is what happened. And since then, we've started taking seats in Leeds and things, and you've got to have a base, you've got to have a core. An emergent party has to focus. You really got to focus if you want to win something. It's tough winning in elections.
So it's been huge growth, and now we're sort of, as a party, we're a player, right? Which we weren't, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're hoping to get to that next tier where you're in the national debate.
Yeah.
How do you manage the sort of the communications from SDP representatives? So people like me, speaking on a podcast where people will hear what I say and think, oh, that's what the SDP believes. I could say something egregious and people would turn off.
Yes.
How do you manage that? Because it's quite difficult when you're leading a small political party and with few people that want to put themselves forward for public office.
I think a lot of it is persistence. I think it's taken time. I think you've got to know what you're trying to do as well. And I think what you're trying to do has to be realistic. I've never been, we do joke about it at conference, prepare for government, but I think if you started making claims about the party or about us that were totally misaligned to our resources or our size, whatever, again, people wouldn't take you seriously. And I think you need to be serious all the way through. And one of the things the strategy initially was for SW1 and the media and political class to realise this party was around, because it might be an option for people to join as much as anything else. So we've done that. They will, in 2018, most people in SW1, even well-informed political journalists, did not know the SDP still exists. They do now. All of them know that now. Some of them think about us. Some of them talk about us. You can get to a stage, if you're serious and you put green papers out like the End of Indifference, you try and do much more than some of the other parties are doing on that. The farms and agriculture green paper ditto. If you issue good policy and you think about things carefully, then the first thing is to be better, right? To be better than the others first. And I think if you're better, if you're still growing, it doesn't matter that you're slightly smaller, but if you're better, you will definitely get bigger. So that's been a thing. But I've always been very realistic about what the growth plan of an emergent party is. And the reason I am is that it's been done several times before. And you have to. It's always in stages. It is always in stages. The SDP in 1981 was slightly different because you had very, very senior Labour Party politicians dropped in, and they already had a public profile. So to do it our way, sort of bottom up, is longer and harder. But in a way, it's better because there was a fragility to starting at the top and then falling out, and it only lasted 7 years, that iteration of it. Whereas, we've been 7 years at this and we're still going and growing. So,
can I
just
continue
follow
on that?
Yeah. I want to know what's the limits to what I can say as an SDP representative. When are you going to say, "Oh, Sebastian, that's way out of line"? Okay,
well, this gets back to the George Orwell point, which I always refer to, which is that only a bigot believes everything a political party publishes as policy. So you join the SDP. I probably shouldn't say this, but there's probably 5% of it I'm not entirely agreement with, because we're a democratic party. And I'll give you an example on House of Lords reform. SDP always had a policy of getting rid of the Lords, scrapping it. And that's my view, personally. That's my view. Conference thought differently. I'll argue for the party policy. I'll never lie, but the party policy is to retain the Lords and reform it, not to get rid of it. And you ought to be able to be grown up enough to say that's the case. Just say say what's true. So as a member, I expect members to have all sorts of views, and I expect our policy to be contested vigorously. And it's fine that it is. It doesn't bother me. I'm perfectly relaxed about this. I think if people started saying, really, we ought to bring back slavery, then I'd probably have convened the wrong people.
Slavery's your red line.
Yeah, slavery is definitely a red line. Something daft like that, it would be crazy. But within the normal scheme of things, particularly on the moral sort of ethical issues, I've been quite open to members about this. We don't have a party political... we don't have a party policy on abortion. Assisted dying, assisted suicide, as I call it, is going through the Commons now as a bill. I've made my own view about it quite plain. I'm against the bill. I think it creates two classes of citizen, really. I have moral problems with it. I'm not a believer, but I have sort of slightly religious views on it as well. And I know that the party is going to have different views on this. And there are other areas. I mean, there are other things like the Russia-Ukraine war. We're realistic about it. Israel-Palestine is another thing which people are going to have very strong views. I know Rod gave a barnstorming response to the outrage on the 7th of October. I think most people in the room agreed with him, some didn't. But that's to be expected. And I think that's fine. I think what I would say is if you're an official, the duty to bat for the official published policy is different to if you're a member. I'm quite comfortable with members having different views on things. It's fine.
I suppose a criticism of that might be, or people might be, a cynical view of it might be that there's things we don't have policy on because it's just a pragmatic way of not annoying people and therefore building the membership. Is there anything in that?
I think there is now, but honestly, I mean, look, you've got to weigh these things up. So I've said the surest way to make a party that's got 10,000 members, the surest way to halve it to 5 and halve it to 2,500 is to take very, very strong views on some of these things and put that right at the front. If you did that, I think it would be quite harsh. And actually, a lot of the traditional practice on things like abortion, rights to abortion, most parties have it as a conscience matter for that very reason, because it would split the party. And so I've got, my responsibility is both to be honest and forthright, which I think we are. I think I think emergent parties are much better able to speak the truth than the others, which is something I value greatly. But I'm also not completely daft, and I don't want to deliberately divide people. So I'm also comfortable with people having a different view on it. So you can understand. Yeah, we'll see how we go. See how we go on it. Yeah.
Good.
Excellent.
Well, thank you for tackling that very tricky one. I'm going to throw in a bit of a curveball, just ask you one more thing.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Hexham.
Yeah.
And close to Hexham, there's a lovely place called Heltwhistle.
Yeah.
With its Lido. Is it Lido or Lido? An outdoor pool. Lido.
We call it the Lido, but...
The Lido.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the swimming pool, outdoor swimming pool.
Outdoor swimming, it's fantastic. It's still there?
Yeah. And I used to use it quite a lot when I worked in Hexham. I used to go off. Lunchtime is just enough in the summer for you to drive to Holty and well, as we call it, Holty locally, and then have a swim and then get back. Yeah.
I was out with some girlfriends the other week. We went for a walk to watch the Murmurations.
Yeah.
And somebody was talking about Lidos.
Yeah.
And said, could you make that SDP policy to build
Construction
some
of
more
Lidos.
Lidos? Yeah.
Well, they did do it, didn't they, in the 30s, a lot of them. So you've got Saltwell, is it Lido or Lido down south? But you've got, some real classics. Yeah. And things like there's one in Highgate, isn't there? And different places I've swam that. Yeah. So in theory we should. Probably some of you know that I'm married to an Australian, so half of my family, more than half, is Australian. I don't get back as much as I'd like. I'm going this year again. And the joke that Australians say, because every small country town in Australia, even small ones, have a big cricket oval, which you pay cricket and Aussie rules on, if it's certainly Aussie rules in the south and Victoria. And every small town has a decent sized swimming pool. Olympic sized swimming pools. And it was shocking, actually, that the northeast, has one. until very recently, just had one in Sunderland. And I wanted one in Hexham. Didn't get my way. We built a brand new 25 metre one, which is crazy. It should be 50. But yeah, the Australians will say, you know, we've got all these pools, and they say, you only need as many pools as you got good swimmers, mate. You know, so that's what they say. You know, so but it's cause and effect, right? We actually have very good swimmers, but despite the fact that we don't have many pools, so we'll look at it. Lido's SDP.
Great, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, if you liked anything that you heard today, go and check out the website sdp.org.uk, and you can join the party as we continue this resurgence.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thanks, William.
Thanks,
Cheers.
William, for
Great to
coming
be here. Thank you.
on. Cheers.